perfectly still. Kira sat perfectly still on the edge of the narrow, mathematically leveled bed in her Selkirk Mental Hospital telemetry room. The architecture of the space was deeply reassuring to her. The walls were painted a sterile, non-reflective off-white. The floor tiles were 12 by 12 linoleum squares, their edges meeting in flawless perpendicular intersections. In a standard operational state, she would have traced those grout lines with her eyes to regulate her heartbeat, bringing her internal data logs back to a state of neutral predictability. Today, however, her internal parameters were entirely corrupted by a new pharmacological variable. She had been placed in the facility exactly 24 hours ago to rebalance her brain chemistry following the hostile hallucinogen breach. To counteract the severe neurological trauma of the synthetic toxin, the medical staff had initiated a new, aggressive medication protocol. The pharmaceutical intervention was designed to repair her serotonin receptors, but the output was catastrophic in its own unique way. Kira was not terrified. She was not panicking. Instead, she was experiencing a systemic overload of relentless, synthetic joy. It felt entirely wrong. Kira looked down at her hands, resting neatly on the lap of her structured green sweater. She felt a bubbling, radiant warmth expanding behind her ribs, forcing the corners of her mouth upward into a physical configuration she did not authorize. The sensation was light, buoyant, and entirely unanchored from logic. She felt no anxiety about the destroyed apartment in Gimli. She felt no lingering terror regarding Darcy's unauthorized intrusions. All the necessary, protective caution she utilized to survive the median population had been temporarily overwritten by a massive, unearned chemical high. At precisely 10 o'clock, the heavy door unlocked with a satisfying, predictable mechanical click. A nurse escorted her down a quiet, brightly lit corridor to a designated consultation room. The spatial transitions were smooth. Kira walked with her spine straight, noting that her usual hypervigilance was completely absent. She did not scan the hallway for auditory spikes or unpredictable movements from other residents. Her brain simply supplied her with a baseline assumption that everything was perfectly fine, which her logical mind knew was a statistical impossibility. Counselor Evans was waiting for her at a round, wooden table. The counselor was a calm, soft-spoken median woman who wore a blue cardigan and kept her hands visibly folded on the tabletop, adhering perfectly to the physical boundaries Kira required. Kira took her designated seat, aligning her knees so they were parallel to the table's central axis. "Good morning, Kira," Counselor Evans said, her tone level and professional. "We have had you on the stabilization medication for a full cycle now. Can you report on your internal data logs? How are you processing the current chemical baseline?" Kira took a measured breath, trying to quantify the irrational brightness expanding in her chest. "My data processing is heavily compromised," Kira stated clearly. "I am experiencing an artificial elevation in my emotional variables. The medication has induced a state of unrealistic happiness. It is highly disruptive." Counselor Evans tilted her head slightly. "Can you describe the elevation for me? What does it feel like subjectively?" Kira searched her vocabulary for the most accurate descriptors, realizing that clinical terminology felt insufficient for the sheer absurdity of the sensation. "It feels as though my internal environment consists entirely of sunshine, rainbows, strawberries, and all good things. My threat detection algorithms are offline. My cognitive output suggests that there is absolutely nothing wrong in the universe. I am currently existing on an emotional mountain, and I do not like it." The counselor nodded slowly, absorbing the assessment without condescension. "You don't like the mountain. Why is that, Kira?" "Because it lacks structural integrity," Kira explained, her fingers tracing a circular pattern on her green sleeves. "Mountains are steep. They are subject to gravitational instability. Existing at this altitude is not my baseline. It is a false positive. I require neutral predictability to function safely. This intense euphoria feels like a loss of control, similar to the chemical breach at the aquatic center, only inverted. I am overly saturated with positive variables, and it is exhausting. Counselor Evans offered a small, validating smile. She did not dismiss Kira's discomfort or tell her she should simply enjoy feeling good. I understand why that feels unstable for you, the counselor said, leaning back slightly to give Kira more acoustic space. But what you are experiencing right now is a necessary part of the stabilization parameter. It is like an ebb and flow. Do you understand that concept? Kira processed the phrase. Ebb and flow. A pattern of decline and subsequent elevation, typically associated with oceanic tides governed by lunar gravity. Exactly, Counselor Evans confirmed softly. When the hallucinogen hijacked your system, it dragged your chemical baseline into a devastatingly deep trench. You experienced a severe, traumatic low. You have been ebbing so long, and so deeply, that right now you need to flow. The medication is the incoming tide. It is pushing you up the mountain so that the trench can fill and level out. Kira paused, letting the mathematical logic of the wave function wash over her. A pendulum swing. An extreme negative value requiring an extreme positive value to cancel out the deficit before it could finally settle at zero. The euphoria was not a permanent, uncalibrated error. It was a compensatory algorithm running its necessary course. The extreme high is a temporary dampening mechanism, Kira reasoned aloud, her hazel eyes focusing intently on the counselor. It is the opposing force to the extreme low. Yes, you will come down in time, Counselor Evans promised gently. The mountain will flatten out. You just need to allow the medication to run its course. Coast your way down. The explanation clicked perfectly into Kira's operational matrix. The sunshine, rainbows, and strawberries were simply biological math balancing its equation. She did not have to trust the feeling. She only had to endure the mechanics of it. She needed to coast her way down from being so high, trusting the trajectory of the curve. Kira looked down at her hands again. The artificial warmth was still there, buzzing brightly beneath her skin, but it no longer felt like a threat. It was merely a transit state. She thought of Jessie, miles away in Gimli, standing behind the diner counter and maintaining her external perimeter. He was her constant variable, an unyielding rock anchored firmly in reality. He was not an emotional mountain. He was solid, level ground. When she finally completed this 21-day stabilization parameter, she would not be trapped in the synthetic euphoria, nor would she be drowning in the sensory terror of the hallucinogen. She would be back to her true baseline. She hoped to be reasonably happy, returning to the quiet, controlled predictability of sweet egg sushi, steampunk music, and Jessie's steady, protective presence. I understand the parameters, Kira said, looking back up at Counselor Evans. I will accept the flow. I will coast until my baseline is restored. Sunday sunlight filtered through the reinforced glass of the Selkirk facility. Kira sat in the quiet common room, traversing the midpoint of her prescribed stabilization parameter and approaching what she had classified as her emotional plateau. The artificial sunshine and rainbows euphoria induced by the compensatory medication was beginning to level out, but the physical toll remained significant. Over the past 7 days, Kira had initiated mandatory shutdown sequences, napping extensively because the biological energy required to sustain an unnatural volume of happiness was fundamentally exhausting. Existing at maximum positive capacity drained her battery faster than a high-friction median social encounter. At 10:15, the ward receptionist handed Kira a rectangular pink slip. It was a transcribed message from the front desk. Jessie had called to confirm his operational coordinates. He was currently meeting with Detective Ryan in Winnipeg, and would initiate transit to Selkirk for an afternoon visitation. Reading the precise, familiar name triggered an immediate internal reaction. Her emotional variables spiked, flooding her chest with a dense, buoyant warmth. Unlike the synthetic euphoria of her medication, this data was logically sound. Jessie was her constant. However, the combined force of the pharmacological high and her genuine affection created a dangerous surplus of kinetic energy. She did not want Jessie to observe her operating at this elevated frequency. She hypothesized it would cause him unnecessary concern. She needed to burn off the excess data before his arrival. Kiera approached the receptionist's curved desk, ensuring she maintained a respectful 3-foot distance. "Excuse me, I require an auditory stimulus to regulate my current kinetic output. Do you have access to the band Jukebox the Ghost?" The receptionist smiled, typing into her computer. "I can put them on the common room speakers for a bit, Kiera. Any specific track?" "Any track with a tempo exceeding 120 beats per minute will suffice," Kiera confirmed. When the upbeat, piano-driven pop rock filled the sterile room, Kiera retreated to a cleared section of the linoleum floor. She closed her eyes and began to move. It was not a median social dance. It was a highly calculated series of rhythmic steps, arm extensions, and spins designed entirely for energy expenditure. She mapped her movements to the piano chords, letting the driving drumbeat pull the excess joy out of her muscles. She stomped her feet precisely on the downbeats, shedding the artificial sunshine with every physical exertion. By the time the 4th song faded out, her heart rate was elevated, but the overwhelming chemical buoyancy had receded into a manageable, quiet hum. She was ready. Jessie arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. The heavy security door clicked open, and he stepped into the common area wearing a heavy insulated jacket, bringing the faint scent of winter air into the clinical environment. Kiera felt her internal systems align the moment she locked onto his visual coordinates. He bypassed the chaotic median groupings without a second glance. In his left hand, he carried a crinkling bakery bag. "External perimeter is secure," Jessie said, his voice dropping into the low, steady cadence he reserved exclusively for her. He handed over the bag. "I acquired your optimal baked goods, giant chocolate chip. I verified the structural integrity." "Thank you. Your acquisition parameters are flawless," Kiera replied, her shoulders dropping visibly. They relocated to a secluded corner of the ward, taking seats in twin vinyl chairs situated away from the primary acoustic traffic. Kiera carefully extracted the massive cookie, breaking it along a pre-calculated fault line to ensure an even distribution of chocolate chips before taking a bite. The dense, sweet starch was deeply grounding. As they chewed in comfortable silence, the heavy double doors opened again. A man in a dark suit and a crisp white collar entered the common room. It was Reverend David, the facility's favorite visiting pastor. Instantly, the median residents flocked to him, their vocal volumes rising in a chaotic, overlapping wave of greetings. They clustered around him like a gravitational anomaly. Kiera observed the behavioral phenomenon with clinical detachment, taking another calculated bite of her cookie. "The median population is highly susceptible to his unverified assurances," she noted quietly. Jessie followed her gaze, keeping his posture relaxed to maintain their safe zone. "He has an established social presence. Has he attempted to run his protocols on you?" "He did," Kiera confirmed, brushing a crumb from her green sweater sleeve. "He initiated a conversation regarding my diagnostic profile. He recounted a historical narrative about Jesus healing the afflicted, and he hypothesized that mental and neurological anomalies could be permanently cured by faith." Jessie's jaw tightened slightly, a micro-expression of protective friction. "And what did you tell him?" "I informed him that my internal operating system does not support the concept of faith healing," Kiera stated evenly. "He then asked if I believed in God. I told him yes, but I also explained that if a supreme architect designed the universe, that is precisely why he engineered scientists and medical professionals. I told the Reverend I would be putting my faith in their verified chemical interventions. Jessie let out a low, deeply affectionate laugh. The tension vanished from his shoulders. He reached across the small gap between their chairs and placed his hand steadily over hers. I am incredibly proud of you, Kira. That is a perfectly structured defense. Kira looked down at their connected hands, but her expression shifted, the corners of her mouth pulling downward. A flush of heat touched her cheeks. She felt a sudden wave of vulnerability disrupting her plateau. I am not entirely proud of my current functional capacity, she admitted, her voice dropping to a near whisper. Jessie leaned in closer, narrowing the acoustic space so she wouldn't have to strain. Query, what is causing the internal error? The stabilization drugs, Kira confessed, her hazel eyes fixed on the linoleum squares. They force my system to process an unnatural volume of happiness. It feels fake. It is a biological lie. And because my system is not designed to run at that emotional frequency, it drains all my available energy. I have been taking multiple naps just to force a system shutdown. I feel ashamed that experiencing positive variables makes me so functionally exhausted. Jessie squeezed her hand, his thumb resting securely against her knuckles. He did not dismiss her shame, nor did he offer median platitudes. He engaged her logic. The exhaustion is not a design flaw, Kira. It is a required processing tax. Your hardware was subjected to a catastrophic chemical breach. Repairing that damage requires massive energetic output. The naps are not a failure. They are a highly efficient biological protocol. You are doing exactly what the mathematics of recovery demand. Kira processed his words, letting the secure logic override her shame. The exhaustion is a processing tax, she repeated. Exactly, Jessie confirmed softly. You will reach your baseline in time. The false data will clear. And when your 21-day parameter is complete and your internal environment is fully secure, we are going to initiate a celebration. Just us, perfectly controlled with an abundance of sweet egg sushi. Kira exhaled a long, steady breath. The buzzing, artificial high was entirely gone, replaced by the profound, quiet safety of her constant variable. I will accept those parameters. The booming, theatrical cadence of Reverend David's voice echoed across the linoleum expanse of the common room. He was currently delivering a heavily embellished parable about forgiveness to a tightly packed cluster of median residents. Kira observed them from a calculated distance of 40 feet, safely sequestered on a vinyl sectional couch. She had successfully initiated a physical proximity protocol with Jessie. He sat with his back against the armrest, while Kira leaned her side against his insulated winter jacket, their legs parallel. This specific geometric arrangement provided optimal thermal regulation without triggering the sensory overload of full-body constriction. Resting on her lap was the tablet they had acquired prior to the chemical breach. The screen displayed a brightly colored digital landscape, where a virtual sinkhole was actively consuming cartoonish trees and buildings. The enthusiastic, resonant voice of the gaming broadcaster Markiplier played through the tablet's dual speakers. He was providing a highly animated commentary on his progress in Donut County. Kira found the game's mechanics deeply soothing. The mathematical certainty of a whole expanding precisely in relation to the mass of the objects it consumed was an excellent regulatory anchor, effectively drowning out the Reverend's unpredictable vocal fluctuations. The quiet equilibrium shattered when Jessie's coat pocket emitted a sharp, rhythmic buzzing. Kira felt the vibrational transfer against her shoulder. Jessie retrieved the device, shielding the screen from the overhead fluorescent glare. The caller ID displayed Detective Ryan's name. I need to take this, Jessie murmured, his voice maintaining the low, steady frequency he reserved entirely for her. "We should relocate to a secure acoustic zone." Kira paused the video, ensuring the digital hole remained perfectly suspended beneath a digital donut shop. She stood, smoothing the hem of her oversized green sweater. Together, they navigated the perimeter of the common room, completely bypassing the religious gathering, and arrived at a reinforced architectural window at the far end of the corridor. The glass felt cold, a rigid barrier against the frozen Winnipeg landscape outside. Jessie answered the call, tapping the speakerphone icon and holding the device securely between them. "Ryan, we are here. What's the update?" "Good afternoon, Jessie." "Kira, assuming you're listening too." The detective's voice crackled through the small speaker, sounding heavily fatigued. "We hit a concrete wall. We picked up the 2 contractors who broke into the Gimli apartment and the Winnipeg pharmacy. We have them dead to rights on the B&D, but they're seasoned. They know if they keep their mouths shut, they'll do minimal time. They absolutely refuse to rat on Darcy. Without a paper trail directly linking her to the synthetic hallucinogen or the funding for the break-in, the Crown won't authorize an arrest warrant for the poisoning." Kira's brow furrowed. She analyzed the data. The hostile variable was evading deletion. "This outcome is structurally flawed," she stated clearly into the microphone. "She is the primary architect of the chemical breach." "I know, Kira," Ryan sighed. "Which is why I'm calling with a Hail Mary. Jessie, Darcy's motive is entirely tied to you. She wants to prove Kira is unmanageable, so you'll run back to her. We need her to admit to the swap on tape. If you were to approach her, pretend you've reached your breaking point with the hospitalizations and the stress, you could get her talking. Play the exhausted, heartbroken ex. Let her think she won. If you get her to confess while wearing a wire, we bypass the contractors entirely." A sharp, intensely uncomfortable friction flared in Kira's chest. The sensation was hot and jagged, corrupting her newly stabilized baseline. The proposed parameter meant Jessie intentionally integrating himself into Darcy's proximity. It meant exposing his physical and emotional coordinates to the very variable that had attempted to destroy them. "No," Kira said, the word escaping before she could run a full logical diagnostic. She looked at Jessie, her hazel eyes wide. "The simulation introduces catastrophic risk. If she requires proof of your supposed reconciliation, she will demand physical intimacy. I cannot authorize a scenario where she engages in biological merging with you. I do not want her mouth on yours. I do not want to lose my constant." Jessie immediately terminated the speakerphone function, holding the phone against his chest to mute Ryan. He turned his full attention to Kira, stepping closer to enclose her in his visual field. "Look at me," Jessie said softly, seamlessly adopting her precise terminology. "My core programming is entirely locked to you. Any interaction I have with that hostile variable would be a strictly simulated maneuver. It is a data extraction protocol, nothing more. I will not engage in unauthorized biological merging. I will utilize defensive posturing to prevent physical contact, just as I did outside the diner. You are my constant, Kira. No external deception will alter my baseline." Kira focused on the warm brown irises of his eyes, mapping the familiar geometry of his features. He was not lying. His historical data proved a flawless success rate in protecting her. The intense spike of jealousy she was experiencing lacked structural integrity. She closed her eyes, forcing a calculated breath into her lungs to regulate her rising heart rate. "My reaction is a chemical artifact," Kira deduced, her voice trembling slightly before finding its mechanical rhythm. "The compensatory stabilization medication is forcing an unnatural emotional sensitivity. It is generating irrational jealousy and fear of abandonment. Logically, I understand that Detective Ryan's proposal is the most mathematically efficient method to neutralize the threat. You don't have to agree if the friction is too high," Jessie assured her, his thumb gently brushing the fabric of her sleeve. We can find another algorithm. No, we must secure the perimeter permanently, Kira replied. She opened her eyes, her posture stiffening with renewed resolve. Put the detective back on the speaker. Jessie complied, lifting the phone. Ryan, we are proceeding with the operation. Thank you, Jessie, Ryan said, relief bleeding into his tone. We'll set up the wire tomorrow. Detective Ryan, Kira interrupted, leaning closer to the device. If I am authorizing my constant variable to execute this deception protocol, I require immediate data regarding the endgame. When he obtains the recorded confession, what exactly will you do with Darcy? I need the specific penal codes she will be charged with to verify that she will be permanently removed from our operational grid. Ryan chuckled faintly, a sound of genuine respect. I can give you that right now, Kira. Aggravated assault, administering a noxious thing with intent to endanger life, and conspiracy to commit an indictable offense. That's a minimum of 5 to 10 years in federal custody. She won't be anywhere near your grid. Kira processed the numbers. 5 to 10 years was a highly satisfactory buffer. It would allow her and Jessie to construct a flawless, impenetrable routine without the looming threat of chemical sabotage. The legal parameters are acceptable, Kira confirmed, looking back up at Jessie. She reached out, looping her fingers securely into his. You may initiate the sting operation, but when it is over, you are required to return to my coordinates for immediate and extensive decontamination involving a predetermined quantity of sweet egg sushi. Jessie squeezed her hand, a small, fiercely loyal smile breaking across his face. Understood. Decontamination is my top priority.